Oh, there we go. Too many
There you
mutes. Too
are.
many mutes. I am here. Thank you so much, and apologize for not changing my name. I left it there as part of my
That's okay.
demonstration for freedom of cancellation in the corporate world. But Martin, I just wanted to say thank you so much. When Doobie announced that you were coming, I thought this is so exciting. I had a question about being hated because it's a reflection of something that I'm really interested in, is how people have a automatic knee jerk thought terminating cliches of hatred and whatnot. But aside from that, because it's kind of, dragging a person through the coals, I wanted to actually ask a different question about American business quality. And then just the last thing, you threw me for a loop there, because I think pleasantly we may share some Swedish friends at the Oxford Martin Shkreli School, which would have been nice if, or one day, for a big school like the Oxford Martin School, but Martin Shkreli. Anyway, about American business. I moved here to Britain about 10 years ago, and I was quite shocked that there's actually a course in American business in Britain. And I thought, how could it be that it's so different? And the reflection I have, I think you have a really deep insight into American business. And a simple way I kind of put it is that people often look at Steve Jobs as one of the most amazing business people in American pantheon of business. But I kind of go, well, what if Steve Jobs was good and that most American business is just shite, as they say here? Any comment on the quality of business in comparison to what it could be, especially from a human's future view?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in
And
terms,
hatred, and the future of hatred, and how you've dealt with hatred. Thank you.
sure, a lot to unpack there, but I think I can touch on it. So, in terms of business success, I mean, really, America's kind of done it well. There's no doubt that we've taken this 300 million person country and ran the table in terms of capitalism and success. I don't think anybody can argue that. And if you look at the market values of our companies, there just is nothing like it, and it's really a remarkable thing. Our GDP per capita, our innovation, all that stuff is really just incredible. Now, what gives rise to that is a really tricky question, because mentioning Steve Jobs for a second is interesting. A lot of people felt Steve Jobs was a sociopath, right? People have this sort of like friendly perspective of him, like he's this nice old computer kind of innovator. But the reality is the guy was a tyrant, right? He was a crazy person to a lot of his colleagues, and a really an animal when it came to his competitive instincts. And Bill Gates was very similar. Bill Gates was widely hated in his time for being a monopolist and other things. And so, American business is, if anything, it's very intense, right? It's one of these things that American business people don't rest on their laurels. They're very vicious. They're very competitive. They very much will stop at anything to be successful. And I think that's sort of something in contrast to a lot of the other countries. I'm thinking a lot of Europe, for instance, not so much the UK, but the rest of Europe, where you can think about kind of like sort of the summer vacation that's a month long, the aristocratic sort of ownership of a lot of the companies, where there's just sort of this very laid back perspective, where there's a lot of graft as well, I should mention, with bribes and things like that. Whereas America is sort of like a little bit more cutthroat, I think. So with respect to the benefit to actual people, I think that there's sort of this attendant benefit that just sort of comes along for the ride. That's probably not intended, but like I said, it just sort of is there. Where you have things like Microsoft Excel, a product that only America could make, the spreadsheet, different things in
Actually,
technology.
Martin, if I might just jump in, it's actually more about internally to America, because for a lot of Americans, there are no other countries in the world.
Sure.
We are the world. And what I'm talking about is the lack, so many ways, the lack of quality and diligence, pride, anything in American business. You're right. Cutthroat, move fast, the ability to push the boundaries in so many ways, but generally just kind of shit, like shit jobs, shit management, shit treating the
Yeah,
employees as shit,
I don't agree at
like
all.
every aspect of
I don't
of
agree whatsoever.
employees.
You can imagine.
Yeah.
You can imagine I wouldn't, right? But yeah, I take exception to that. I think most people would say that Apple makes the highest quality product in the world, and that's why it's so expensive. Most people would say that in fact, the European way of treating employees is the shit way, because you can't get rich in Europe if you're a software developer. You're not going to get stock options. You're not going to get all this stuff, and that's why Europe doesn't have any tech companies. In fact, those aristocratic owners, the family companies that you and I all know, or you and I both know, and everybody else does too, they don't have room at the top for somebody that doesn't have the last name. The LVMH last name or any other aristocratic European company. Britain is a bit different. Again, it's more modeled like the U.S. is, but in France or in Germany, I mean, you got to have the right last name to be a C-suite person at half these companies. You might think that they're less, more employee friendly, but I find there's quite still a bit of like sexism and racism and things like that in a lot of these European countries, because their populations are a little less diverse. So you actually have a number of minorities in America, I think, that are running these companies. That it's not the case in Europe. So I don't know. I have a different opinion. Obviously, I'm an American by birth and
No, no, no. Actually, let me just try one last time. And
all right.
it's actually, I should not have mentioned anything outside of America, not a comparison that American business compared to American business. That a lot of American business is lazy, gets away with inefficiencies that are certainly tried to be covered for. Oh, this is what I forgot to say. If you know of the Ribbon Farm Gervais principle of business management and the absurdity of the way that the structures are and the not about employees inhumanity, but the inhumanity to humans overall. And I'm not talking about like just hippy dippy stuff, but rather that there's so much more potential to leverage but the human effort of the engine of everyone, whether it's mental or physical, and it just kind of leaving a lot of money on the table. And often that's where disruption comes from, because one business is like, well, we're fat and lazy, and then
Yeah.
their lunch is eaten. So it's more about business in America being lazy and stupid and pathetic, and that so much potential on the upside to actually whatever this great reset may be in real terms of just it's a new century for American business, perhaps a project for a new century of American business or something.
Well,
Anyway, I
I,
should
I
shut
would
up.
say,
Thank
that,
you.
and I'm not going to belabor this point, but I'll just say one last time, is that it's hard to criticize something without making a comparison as to what's better. So when you look at what's been done the best, it's very hard in an absolute term to say, well, it could be so much better, because if it could be so much better, then you could say how and why, and people would do it if it was obvious. And I think that it's hard. But I will say this, like, I'll give you an example of something that's changed in American software development, which is a field I know a little bit about, is we've had this agile workflow process, which is supposed to be, a better way to do something that's really hard. It's really hard to take a team of people.
Extreme programming for the win.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's very hard to take a team of people and get them to write a computer program, right? It's one of these things that's just awfully difficult to do, and the agile system has sort of been a major innovation in the way American software companies and the world software companies sort of operate. And whether you want to give credit for it all the way back to IBM, or you want to sort of give a more modern company the credit for it, regardless, the point is that there are always organizational ways to improve. And I think American business schools study that to an absurd degree, right? If you think about getting an MBA, other than the LSE and Sorbonne and a handful of other places, like, you think of the MBA almost as a quintessentially American thing, and we do more organizational research maybe than any other place. So I really don't agree with a lot of what you said. I respect your opinion, of course, and I do think it's important to say if something is not great, then what is better? And it doesn't mean that we have to be content with what we have. We should never be. And there's certainly shortcomings to American business, and I'm not the first to say that there aren't, and I certainly think that we have a lot of issues, especially at the bigger companies that are slow and lumbering. But one of the funny things about America that's really interesting is the top 100 companies list from every decade or every, say, 20 or 30 years is basically unrecognizable to the next to somebody two
That's
decades
right.
ago. Which is really funny and interesting. So I do think if there's any indica of change and constant, sort of rebirth and so forth, I think that you do see it in that. again, I don't know what perfection looks like to you. You seem to have your ideas of what would be
I
better.
think I represented myself completely poorly because I think I'm
That's all
totally
right.
in agreement with you, and I was sort of stimulating you to speak to the everyone else
I
who
do that too
might not be
sometimes.
in agreement about how much business in America can be better, in especially looking at the developments in big tech, in the focus of, like you're saying, in terms of business focus. But and I was really just speaking to how there is a lot more looseness in terms of being able to be better through augmented intelligence. You know, AI is one thing, but augmented human intelligence, as simple as a Bloomberg terminal, really goes a long way. And we've got a lot of upside, is what I'm saying on that. And I
Yeah,
just
no,
look forward to American businesses where we could be proud that they're doing a really good job and not like being lazy, stupid, etc.
yeah,
My
and there's
apologies
a
for.
lot. We'll go on to the next question, but I think there's a lot to ask about this because recently, especially, we've had this phrase which really bothers me called there's two of them. There's quiet quitting, and then there's rest and vest. Both of which are kind of this idea that, as especially in tech, that you can just sort of basically get by with doing as little as you can, and then sort of take advantage of these companies being, say, less aggressive about firing people and more sort of nicer to the human, which is a good thing you would think. But then people sort of taking advantage of it, which is what you would imagine. There are people who have three remote work
Google does
jobs.
make $1,000 million a week in after net profit, as in they need to buy mattresses to put it in. So $1 billion is, as you mentioned before, they could afford to hire 1 million people a week for $1,000 because they do have the liquid cash for that.
Well, the problem is that it costs more than $1,000, right? And that you
Well, but
need.
1 million people at $1,000 somewhere in the world they could hire, even though the YouTube says we're sorry, we can't have enough people to help determine if your video is hate speech or not.
I
But
agree.
anyway,
I actually
there's
have
a
the same.
lot of money.
I have the same frustration with Google, and it is very ironic,
I
isn't it?
love Google and trust them more than anyone except for Facebook. Thank you.
All
Okay.
right.
Well, thank you, Saxon. Thank you very much.